A year ago, if someone had asked me to speak even 2 sentences in English, I would have frozen on the spot. My throat would tighten, my palms would sweat, and my mind would suddenly go blank. I used to avoid situations where English was required, whether it was a simple conversation with a stranger, filling out a form, or even watching a movie without subtitles. But deep inside, I always knew that English was not just another language. For me, it represented freedom, confidence, and opportunities. I grew up watching people who spoke English fluently being treated with more respect, admired for their intelligence, and given better chances in life. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to open doors for myself that had always seemed locked. At first, it felt like an impossible dream. I had tried learning before, downloading apps, memorizing grammar rules, or repeating random phrases. But I always gave up after a few days. The language seemed too big, too complicated, too far away from me. My accent felt heavy, my sentences were broken, and I feared being laughed at. But one night, after failing to introduce myself in English during a group discussion, I made a promise to myself. No matter what it takes, no matter how many mistakes I make, I will learn English in 1 year. I didn't know how I would do it, but I knew why I had to. And sometimes, knowing your why is stronger than any how. That night, I wrote on a piece of paper, 1 year from today, I will be able to speak, read, and write English confidently. I will no longer hide. I will no longer be silent. That was the first spark of my journey. The morning after I made that promise to myself, I woke up with a strange mix of excitement and fear. Excitement because I felt like I was about to start a new chapter of my life. Fear because I had no idea how to climb such a big mountain. I began with what I had: a cheap smartphone, internet connection, and a notebook. That was my entire toolkit. I didn't join any expensive coaching center or buy big grammar books. I decided to learn in the simplest, most direct way possible, by surrounding myself with English every single day. At first, I started watching short YouTube videos about learning English. Some were about basic grammar. Others were motivational stories of people who had learned English as a second language. I remember one teacher saying, "Don't be afraid of mistakes. Mistakes are proof that you are learning." Those words stuck with me. I set small, daily goals. On the first day, I promised myself to learn just 5 new words and make sentences with them. I chose words like hope, dream, strong, try, and learn. I wrote them in my notebook and practiced sentences out loud. I hope I can learn English. My dream is to speak fluently. I am strong. I will try. My sentences were simple, almost childlike. But that was okay, because I was building a foundation. The second week, I started listening to English songs. At first, I didn't understand much, but I forced myself to follow along with the lyrics. I would pause, repeat, and try to catch the words. Sometimes, I would write them down phonetically in my notebook, the way they sounded to me. Then came movies. I picked easy ones with subtitles and watched them again and again. I remember watching The Pursuit of Happiness and crying not just because of the story, but because I understood more than I expected. That gave me confidence. Soon, I started speaking to myself in English. It felt silly at first, standing in front of the mirror and saying things like, "Hello, how are you today? I am fine, thank you." But slowly, those mirror conversations built my courage. Every night before sleeping, I would journal in English. At first, my diary looked like this. Today I wake up. I go to school. I eat food. I am happy. But after a month, my sentences started to grow. Today I woke up feeling tired, but I pushed myself to study. I learned new words and practiced speaking in front of the mirror. I feel proud of myself. The progress was slow, but it was real. What kept me moving forward was consistency. Even when I was tired, even when I felt lazy, I reminded myself of that promise I had made on paper. 1 year from today, I will speak confidently. And so, step by step, word by word, sentence by sentence, I entered the world of English. No journey worth taking is ever smooth. Mine certainly wasn't. At first, everything felt exciting, like I had finally discovered a secret map to a treasure. But soon, reality hit me. Learning English was not just about memorizing words or watching movies. It was about changing habits, pushing through discomfort, and facing embarrassment head-on. The first time I tried speaking English with another person, it was a disaster. It was a hot afternoon when a tourist came to my town, asking for directions. I thought, this is my chance. I can finally test what I've been practicing. My heart raced as I approached him. I tried to say, "The bus stop is near the market." But what came out was, "Bus, stop, market there." The man looked confused, then smiled politely and walked away. My cheeks burned. For the rest of the day, I replayed that moment in my head, feeling like a fool. That wasn't the only time. In class, whenever the teacher asked a question in English, I avoided eye contact, terrified she might pick me. Once, during a presentation, I froze completely, unable to say a single word. The room filled with laughter, and I wanted to disappear. Those moments hurt. They made me question myself. Am I wasting my time? Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe English is not for me. But then I remembered something I had once read. Every master was once a beginner. Every fluent speaker was once broken. So, instead of giving up, I changed my perspective. I started treating embarrassment as a teacher. Every mistake, every laugh, every failure was a lesson. I began writing down my mistakes in my notebook. If I mispronounced a word, I would look it up on YouTube later and repeat it 20 times until it felt natural. If I used the wrong tense, I would write 5 sentences with the correct one. Another challenge was consistency. Some days, I didn't feel like studying. Some nights, I was too tired to write in my journal. Sometimes my friends mocked me, saying, "Why are you wasting time speaking to yourself in English? You'll never be fluent." But I had promised myself a year, and I wasn't going to quit. I built small tricks to stay motivated. I pasted sticky notes on my walls with English words like confidence, courage, believe, speak. Every time I felt low, I looked at them. I also started rewarding myself. If I completed a week of consistent practice, I allowed myself to watch a favorite English movie guilt-free. Slowly, I began to see improvement. My vocabulary grew. I could understand songs better. My journal entries started sounding more natural. But the fear of speaking publicly still haunted me. That fear didn't disappear overnight. It took dozens of embarrassing moments, dozens of mistakes, and dozens of small victories to break it. But I kept reminding myself, fluency is not built in comfort. It is built in struggle. And so even when the fear tried to silence me, I chose to speak anyway. They say the darkest hour comes before the dawn. For months, I had been stumbling, making mistakes, and facing embarrassment. But then, slowly, without even realizing it, something inside me began to shift. The first breakthrough came on an ordinary evening. I was watching a video interview in English, without subtitles. Normally, I depended on subtitles like a crutch. But that day, I decided to turn them off. At first, it was hard. I only caught fragments of words. But as the conversation continued, I realized with a shock. I understood what they were saying. Not every word, not every sentence, but enough to follow the meaning. That moment felt like magic. For the first time, English wasn't just strange sounds. It was communication. That small success gave me courage to push harder. I started joining online groups where people practiced English together. The first time I joined a Zoom call, I was trembling. My voice shook when I said, "Hello, my name is." But the people on the other side smiled warmly and encouraged me. For the first time, I felt like I belonged in a conversation, even if my words were broken. Day by day, my confidence grew. I practiced speaking out loud whenever I could. Ordering food in English, greeting strangers, even thinking in English while walking down the street. Another breakthrough came through journaling. One night, as I flipped through my old notebook, I read my first entry. "Today I wake up, I eat food, I am happy." Then I looked at my latest entry. "Today I felt nervous before joining an online English session. But once I started speaking, I realized that people were patient and kind. They corrected me without judgment, and I actually enjoyed the conversation. I feel stronger now." The difference was unbelievable. The same person who once struggled to form basic sentences was now expressing feelings, thoughts, and reflections. But the most powerful moment came during a family gathering. my cousin from another city who studied in an English medium school, started speaking in English to show off. Usually, I would have stayed quiet, pretending not to understand. But this time, something inside me refused to stay silent. I smiled and joined the conversation. At first, my words were not perfect. My cousin's eyes widened in surprise, and my family looked at me differently, no longer as the quiet one who avoided English, but as someone who had worked hard and changed. That night, I went home and cried, not out of sadness, but out of pride. For the first time, I truly believed, yes, I can do this. I am becoming fluent. It was not the end of the journey, but it was the turning point. The moment when the fire inside me became unstoppable. A year might sound like a long time, but when you dedicate yourself fully, it passes in the blink of an eye. What once felt impossible slowly became part of my daily life, and step by step, I transformed into a different person. At the start of my journey, I was someone who avoided eye contact when English was spoken. I was someone who stayed quiet in group discussions, who felt small and invisible. But 12 months later, I was standing taller, speaking with confidence, and embracing opportunities I would have once run away from. By the end of the year, English was no longer a subject I studied. It had become part of my lifestyle. I thought in English. I spoke in English. And I consumed English content daily. Reading English newspapers in the morning felt natural. Writing long journal entries at night was no longer a task. It was a joy. I had moved from simple sentences to complex expressions, where once I wrote, "I am happy today." Now I could write, "Today I realized that learning a language is not about perfection, but about communication, connection, and growth." The biggest transformation was in my ability to speak. I was no longer afraid of making mistakes. I could walk up to strangers and start conversations. I could introduce myself fluently in group discussions. I even began helping my friends who struggled with English. One unforgettable moment was when I delivered a short speech at a community event. A year earlier, the very thought of standing on stage would have paralyzed me. But this time, I stood with the microphone in hand, heart racing, and said confidently, "Good evening, everyone." A year ago, I couldn't even say this sentence in English. But today, I am standing here, speaking to all of you, because I refused to give up. The applause that followed felt like thunder inside me. It was proof that my hard work had paid off.